Welcome to Career Practitioner Conversations. This podcast is presented by the National Career Development Association. I'm Melissa Venable, NCDA Director of Professional Development, and I'm excited to introduce this episode. It's another in the Career Practitioners of Tomorrow series, recorded by NCDA's Diversity Initiatives and Cultural Inclusion Committee. Thanks for listening.
Welcome, everyone, to the Career Practitioners of Tomorrow podcast series. I'm Dr. Nina Talley, the Director of Career Development at the University of South Florida, and I am honored to serve as your moderator for Session 2, Core Competencies and Emerging Trends, Evidence-Based Approaches to Professional Growth. This series was designed to support graduate students, new career professionals, and early career practitioners who are building their professional identity in today's evolving world of work. Each session features leaders across counseling, higher education, workforce development, and employer engagement, sharing real-world guidance to help you grow with confidence and purpose. Today, we're focusing on evidence-based strategies to develop your core competencies, everything from scholarship and presentations to networking, mentorship, and leveraging NCDA to fuel your growth. Before we begin, I'm excited to introduce our incredible panelists. First, we have Dr. Christian Chan of the University of North Carolina at Greensboro. And the second batter we have on for tonight is Victor Masalia, the Director of Career Services at the University of Minnesota School of Public Health. So thank you so much for being here, and let's jump in. Career advisors work in so many different contexts: universities, community organizations, workforce programs, HR teams, employer relations, and beyond. But regardless of the setting, there are foundational competencies that unite our profession. So, Dr. Chan, would you start us off by discussing some of the core competencies and why grad students and new practitioners should think about professional development early in their careers?
Absolutely, Dr. Talley. Again, thank you so much for having us here and for engaging in this important dialogue. What we think about when we think about core competencies, they are so intertwined with what we see as certifications, right, that are related to professional advancement, and that they are also related to the ways that we see, right, our job functions, our responsibilities, and our contributions in our respective work settings in career development. And so when we think about core competencies, some of the most important ones, right, are the ones that drive our ethics, right, drive what we do, who we are, and how we operate to the benefit, and that's the key word, right, to the benefit of our clients. It's not just about not doing harm. And if you even think about the work that we've all been collectively doing on the Committee on Diversity Initiatives and Cultural Inclusion for the National Career Development Association, something that I want to highlight is that several years ago, right, we framed what we called a positively worded statement. And what that meant was that rather than just identifying, for example, non-discrimination, right, as our approach, we were also trying to reinforce what do we do to to embed and employ culturally sustaining care to the work of our clients and our students that we serve. And with that here, that we're not only seeing it from a way of like, just don't do this, but it's also, what are we doing that's ultimately going to be beneficial and optimal for our clients and our students and their well-being? And so when I think about some of the core competencies that all career advisors should know, I think they're often tied to our respective settings. As we know, career development, the field, is pretty vast in terms of our representation. So many of us are counselors, resume writers, career coaches, and higher ed administrators, right? So we might be operating right from competencies and guiding ethical documents like the NCDA, the National Career Development Association Code of Ethics, And for those of us who are counselors, right, or trained as counselors, we're also trained in the NCDA Code of Ethics and the American Counseling Association Code of Ethics. But that also doesn't only limit us there, right? I think even for me, I should be knowledgeable, especially if I'm supervising or working collaboratively with a team of colleagues from all of these various disciplines. I think a lot about, right, SHRM, right? So who does a lot of work around HR certification. So SHRM and human resources. And then I also think a lot about NASPA, right? And ACPA, right? And ACPA, who has a very close history with the American Counseling Association, but when we think about ACPA and NASPA, and then of course, when I think about NACE, right? Like I think a lot about, especially when we're thinking about what we do in career practice, right? Career advising, career coaching, all of our professional associations, there are reasons they've cultivated these guiding documents for so many years and why they routinely update them for between 6 to 12 years, right? On that rotation. So I often look to my professional association first, and I know that we'll be diving quite a bit into that in our conversation here, but there's a reason why they're attached formally to our professional association.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And just to ask a part two of this question as well, how, how do you choose what professional development or experiences are needed most?
So one of the pieces I'll highlight in my own work, right? So a lot of my work centers on intersectionality, especially as it pertains to career development. And intersectionality, not just meaning, right, the intersections of social identities and statuses, but also as we think about how do we dismantle multiple intersecting forces of oppression, racism, heterosexism, Islamophobia, right, that are all happening within our respective work settings in career development and even the workforce itself. And something that I often emphasize, not only for supervisees, counselors, students, colleagues that I work with, is that when we think about multiculturalism and what we frame as standards for culturally sustaining career development practice, those are often intertwined with our ethics, right? So it is ethical, right, to be multicultural, and it is multicultural to be ethical, right? So in that vein, they are not mutually exclusive. And where I think, for example, many of our new practitioners who are really getting their foot in the field, I often help them think, okay, what is it in terms of what is your professional home per se, right? Even if you are located in career development, I think you find that you're connecting yourself with your professional home and what you've been trained in originally, right? So for example, myself, I've been trained as a counselor both in my master's and my PhD. So of course, there's a reason why I'm looking toward the ACA and NCDA Code of Ethics. And with that being said, like, right, so for our colleagues who work primarily, right, in higher education settings, they might be looking toward, yes, the NCDA Code of Ethics, but also to professional standards guided by ACPA and NASPA, right? And so in that vein, that might be helpful for them. And then I know many, many colleagues reference NACE as well as a part of their work, especially for those who's working in higher ed, university, and college career counseling centers. So when I think about where new practitioners and grad students, where they might be looking, I think our first exposure comes from our training background, right? So what we've been trained in, both especially at a bachelor and maybe at a graduate level, right? So I would say start there. And of course, especially as you're listening to this podcast, it's very, very helpful to get familiar with the NCDA Code of Ethics. And the final piece I'll highlight here is that for those of us, especially even for me, right, even though I've been trained in a particular discipline, it's also important for me, right, to familiarize myself with all of the professional standards and codes of ethics that cut across all of our different respective disciplines featured in the career development field. Because I want to know, like, especially what my colleagues are also held to, because then I also need to understand, right, how to ethically, right, supervise, but also how to be supportive of what they're ethically held to in their practice.
Excellent. Thank you so much for excellent insight. Victor?
Yeah, I was going to. That was fantastic, Dr. Chan, and that just maybe as a rubric as well. So if participants would Google NCDA career competencies, you'll see the multicultural career competencies. There's a list of them, and so you might want to do a self-assessment to see where you are on. I'll just list. There's about 10 of them here. I won't list all 10 of them. The first one is career development theory is the first one, and that's a huge area of exploration. Next one's individual and group counseling skills. And some of us have counseling backgrounds, some of us don't. And so if that's important for our role, that might be an area that we might want to improve. And so there's a list of them there. And so that even in the theory part of it, like when someone asks you, like, what's your career development theory? How do you work with a student, or how do you work with an alumni? Being able to talk about your interests, your experience, you'll feel that much more confident as you grow and develop as a professional.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that insight. And Vic, give some tips for new practitioners, such as presenting research, writing articles, or submitting conference proposals.
Thank you for that, Dr. Talley. So at the beginning of my career, I was pretty green. I worked at the University of St. Thomas is where I got my start. And these seemed like very unattainable goals for me. The scholars, the presenters at conferences just seemed, it wasn't for me. Until I was approached by a faculty member and said, "Hey, Vic, you're interested in," this is that early internet, but you're interested in online work and counseling. Do you want to do a workshop together? And so he and I co-developed a proposal for the Minnesota Career Development Association, and lo and behold, it got accepted. And so my thought here is that the more we can write articles, give presentations, submitting for a proposal, like every time you don't apply for submit a proposal, the answer is always no. So what do you have to lose? It's just basically time. But as far as the profession and what we're doing is what are you becoming? I'm becoming a career development professional. And part of that is to be engaged with the language, being up to date on various topics, collaborating. So a couple thoughts on how to go about it was what content would you want to talk about? What gets you on fire? What are you curious about? You may not be the expert, but what do you want to contribute into the conversation? I'm doing a presentation on, I did a presentation, it was AI and the art of being human. And there's a lot to learn. This was last year. There's a lot to learn about AI, but I'm like, wow, we're trying to train AI as to be human. Well, what if we reverse that? Okay. And I was just very curious. And so I'm more knowledgeable about that topic just because I explored that and I collaborated with that. If you haven't presented that much, or if you haven't submitted a proposal, it's just great to get a colleague, a former supervisor, a present supervisor, a faculty member that you respect and can learn from. Where to present, you could go, if you're working for a university, there's a lot of opportunities to go to the classroom, student workshops, staff meetings, graduate seminars. We have the Minnesota Career Development Association, like I mentioned, NCDA, where we did that AI session. So go to your local CDA, NCDA, national conferences there. There's community partners. There's opportunities for nonprofits that might really appreciate it. Religious affiliations that might need some career development topics, lunch and learns, et cetera, et cetera. Dr. Chan and Dr. Talley might have even more suggestions there. But I think just getting in the habit of writing proposals. It doesn't have to be like an academic journal. It could be for a newsletter. So the sky's the limit on getting involved in those areas.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And giving presentations and submitting proposals can be intimidating for those who are new to the profession. So, Vic, describe how to overcome that imposter syndrome for practitioners with marginalized identities and encourage young and new professionals to put themselves out there.
Well, thank you for that question, Dr. Talley. And as I was thinking about this question, thinking about where I started to, even I've heard, I don't know how accurate or timely this data is, but they say there's data out there that speaking in front of people are more afraid of that than death. I think they go like, first of all, people are more afraid of death, but then presentation, because that's pretty scary stuff. People freeze and they can't imagine themselves doing that. And I think that can be part of our profession too. It's like, I remember like when I had to meet my first student, am I going to be good enough, and am I going to serve this person? And we both survived that meeting. So my thought here is that just leveraging what Dr. Chan led us with the competencies is get familiar with the tools of career development, figure out where you are on a scale, if you want to do a Likert scale on these competencies, and it's like, what do I need to be better in each particular area? We all have the opportunity to be successful, but we don't get anywhere if we don't stretch the comfort zone. Okay, change happens when we're uncomfortable, and being self-aware about our self-efficacy and where we are. I'm going to be talking about building relationships in a moment, but you're not alone in this profession. NCDA, your state career development association, there's a cadre of folks that can help you with these skills as you go forward.
Awesome. Absolutely. The importance of building your network and having support amongst your colleagues is so important. And I hope we're demonstrating this as we are giving this podcast. Vic, another question. What are ways to connect with potential mentors and project collaborators?
I love this question. One of my thoughts as a career counselor is that success is about relationships. Okay, we don't get success on our own. We just don't. We are successful for the people that we connect with, we hang out with. As I mentioned, we're becoming career professionals. We're becoming a really great member of a very awesome profession. I'd say I have the best job ever, and that's helping people through transition. So who's going to help me through my transition? So there's a few different ways that you can do this. And so it could be start with the competencies and say, okay, I want to build in some of these competencies. That first one, as I mentioned, was career development theory. Boy, I could get some knowledge through reading books and listening to podcasts, but like, who could I have some conversations with on how to develop my career development theory expertise? There's many people in NCDA that has that ability. So universities, it would be a good place to look for faculty members and students, graduate students or undergraduate students that are interested in career development topics. I think LinkedIn is a fantastic tool for research and for connecting people. A lot of folks are nervous or anxious about reaching out to so-called strangers. I believe that the content makes it warm. So if you're interested, I'm interested in AI and the art of being human, I could go to LinkedIn and do some search on artificial intelligence with two words, put them in quotes, artificial intelligence and career development, and a list will come up. I could reach out, look at some of those profiles and reach out through LinkedIn and see if I could conduct an informational interview. Okay. When you go to those informational interviews is come in with some questions and be curious. Also, I think about these terms of building relationships too. At the end of that conversation, you could say, do you mind if I stay in touch and explore this topic with you further?
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you so much for that insight. Dr. Chan, opportunities to grow within NCDA and other professional communities for counseling, career services, and workforce development is so important. So, can you highlight a little bit about that?
Absolutely. Some of my reflections on this question dovetail with what Vic was sharing. And what I often reflect on, right, is especially as I circle back to Vic's thoughts about what does it mean, right, to overcome imposter phenomenon? What does it mean to overcome to put yourself out there, right? And what does it mean to really also buffer the effects of marginalization and how it even seeps into our perspectives, right, of ourselves and our accomplishments? One of the ways that I often reflect on this, both from my own personal journey, but also because of the work that I do in supporting and mentoring, right, colleagues, particularly colleagues with marginalized identities, one of which is also saying, find the people who remind you of your joy. Because it's not just, okay, what can I do to just get ahead or just for professional advancement? But when you find people who help to foster your joy, to help you see that you can remain true and authentic to who you are, and then to help you see that this is not about just getting ahead, but this is about just being authentic and happy and joyful, right, in the work. Everything comes along with that. And so all of the success comes along with that. And I will say, I think a lot about those community members. You feel it right away, right? You feel it when you go to the conference or if you go, right, and even connect with someone virtually. So I think a lot about for what Vic shared about ways to connect with potential mentors and project collaborators, that sometimes it's not, yes, showing up to the conference and the meetings are important. And remember, there are all these meetings that happen in between that time, right? Because we know that conferences aren't always accessible to all of our community members. So sometimes they're not able to show up yearly to the conference in person, but there are other opportunities like the meetings that we have for our committee or task forces, right? Calls to serve openly. Those are ways that you can connect. But also it's that even maintaining, right, that social media presence and network also gives you an opportunity, right, to continuously cross paths. And when you cross paths with people who share that same joy, that same passion, those are the people who remind you, these are the people who are part of my community, right? And people who will surprise you more than you ever know that you'd be surprised, right? And what I mean here is I think a lot about examples where there are people in my life who I would very much call a mentor, and they would have never claimed themselves as mentors, right, to me. But they were so grateful for that because that is what it meant to them. And that's what they mean to me, right? That even the messages, the daily affirmations, the weekly affirmations that they provided of just saying, you belong, you matter, you are a part of this field, and you have valuable insights already, right? That's what mattered. And I think sometimes we wait, especially for many of our colleagues, to say, oh, it only until I achieve this amount of experience or this degree or certification or this set of accomplishments, that's the only way, right, that I feel like I'm able to contribute or that I have meaningful and valuable insights. All of our, especially graduate students, all of our new students and our new professionals all have valuable insights right now in this very moment. And that they're bringing something that's shaping the entire culture of our field and our organization. And so I really wanted to emphasize that. And I think about, again, these opportunities to grow within NCDA. It's about showing up to these meetings, right, in between the conferences, right? So, and again, it's also about, I want to reinforce what Vic shared earlier. When you make a connection with somebody and you always show up, right? We know this in human resources, career development, resume writing. we know this. You show up with your business card. You always have one, right? And it's funny. It's like it's becoming a lost art. And I still have mine. I bring mine everywhere. So I would say bring your business card everywhere. Exchange those business cards because it also is a prompt. It's a memory, right? To remind yourself, oh, I need to reach out to this person and follow up with them after the conference, right? And if they don't respond, take another moment to follow up with them a couple weeks later, right? Because just because they don't respond doesn't mean that they don't want to connect with you. Sometimes you never know what happens. I mean, I'm not going to criticize certain email platforms, but some of them are terrible. But with that, right, there are moments where they might not be responding because it ended up in their spam, right? Or something in their server basically flagged the email. So they weren't able to see you, right? Or see your email the first time. And they always appreciate the follow-up. And so, and I say that even, right, when you think about speakers and leaders that you connect with, right? Even keynotes that you connect with, most of them are very, very human and they want to connect with you too. So don't be afraid to reach out to them. Most of the time, they want to hear from you too. And that relationship is important to them just as much as it is to you. So I would say that's another way. And the final way I'll highlight this. So in addition to our social media presence and our networking on social media, what I'll also highlight too is that there are a lot of times, right? It's not only that angle of getting engaged in professional service to the profession, but it's also about the angle, right, of finding all these online communities. So for example, Facebook groups, LinkedIn groups, right? So there are opportunities like that where people just connect based on their passion and based on something that they really care about in the community. And the last part I'll highlight is even at our local community, right? So I'm on the board of directors for North Carolina for Community and Justice, which has a ton of, it's very much a human relations organization. So we do a lot of equity, diversity, and inclusion work. And there are many colleagues who are on the board of directors who are all in the HR world, right? And it was just such a cool surprise and crossroad for our work together. So, get involved in the local community and find ways to contribute there, because that's also a way that you sustain your professional development and your culture and who you are.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I can't believe the time. This has been so amazing and so insightful to our new career practitioners. And I want to thank you all for such thoughtful insights that you have rendered to us. Before we begin closing out, I want to open the floor. Is there anything additional that any one of you would like to add to our listeners? Perhaps a final recommendation or a word of encouragement?
Dr. Chen?
Go ahead, Vic.
Oh, first off, Dr. Chen, I just want to say I was very inspired about meeting people with joy. That just it filled my cup even as you were saying that. I also really want to punctuate too is looking for ways of service. So as we talked about being able to articulate your skills, your strengths, your competencies, is looking for the need in there too. What committee do you want to be in? And being able to say like, hey, I'm a really good writer. I love to write. Or I joined the diversity committee because I'm really interested in social justice matters. And I really want to make sure I can make a positive change as I'm becoming this more skilled professional development. I'm at victorm@umn.edu if anyone would care to continue the conversation. If so, but thank you so much for inviting me to chat with you all today.
Vic, you read my mind. I was just going to say to our listeners for the podcast that feel free to reach out. We are here, but I want to be a support to you and your journey. So feel free to reach out anytime. If you see me on LinkedIn, feel free to reach out on LinkedIn, add me as a connection. If you'd like to, I also respond to my emails. So if you would like to reach out to me via email, it's cdchan@un. So that's cdchan@uncg.edu.
Awesome. This has been a rich and energizing conversation. And I want to thank you both, Dr. Christian Chan and Victor Masalia, for this wonderful experience and sharing your experiences and your pearls of wisdom. A few reminders for our listeners. The resources mentioned today will be posted in our Career Practitioners of Tomorrow resource guide, which you can access through the URL listed in the episode description. Session 1 covered our introduction of the CPT community, and this episode will also be available soon. In Section 3, our upcoming session, it's going to be featured technology and future focused. And Session 4 will be ethics and action, impact and advocacy. And they will be released early in 2026. So you don't want to miss them. We also welcome your feedback, so use the CPT contact form to share questions, reflections, or topics you like our panelists to address in future sessions. Thank you again for joining in with us today. I'm Dr. Nina Talley, and this has been Session 2 of the Career Practitioners of Tomorrow podcast. Take care, and we look forward to learning with you next time.